is Nithya Ramachandra from the NR Hour Sports Show. This is episode 889. I'm joined by a really special guest. She's such an inspiration. Her name is Jacqui Hurley. She's a former Irish sports athlete. She's a coach. She's an author. She's a broadcaster too. So she does everything in the sports world. Man, go follow her on all social media formats. She's one of the best in my opinion. But first of all, Jacqui, I just want to say thank you for joining us today on the show. It took us a while to make this happen, but we finally did. How are you and your family doing today?
I'm good. Thanks a million for having me on the show. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so I can't wait to get to your story because you have an inspiring one. I've read it through, and man, Jacqui, first I just want to start with your childhood growing up, and for you, when did you get interested in playing sports and getting into sports, and then who was your role model that you looked up to?
It's funny. My mom and dad were really into sport, which I think a lot of kids who I see now, even when I'm talking to them, like parents make such a big difference. I'm sure you see this in your interviews when you're chatting to people, but like, to me, the parents are really the fundamental to when you're getting kids interested. And it doesn't have to be like elite sports. It's actually just getting out. Like my mom and dad were really good about, let's just go and try everything. So like we had one of those like 7-seater cars where there was just constantly kids in the car. It was just like, come on, we're all going. We're going to play football. We're going to play basketball. We're going to whatever it was. So like for me, I mean, cliched as it sounds, like my parents were kind of my idols when I was a kid because like they made everything accessible. And I knew that they played sport too, and it was important to them. So what started out as me watching them, then they started taking me to watch like Irish athletes, but it started with them.
So speaking of growing up in Dublin, what was that like growing up as a child there? And what were obviously sports, they play a little different there, but what was it like growing up there and representing your country and playing sports over there as an athlete?
So it's kind of really weird because like even though I was like born in Ireland, I lived here for the first 3 years of my life. I actually moved to Australia when I was 3 and lived there for 7 years. So like my formative years playing sport were in Australia, which is like, again, really different because like netball is really big over there. Athletics is really big over there. Whereas like in Ireland, they wouldn't have been as big when I was younger. So when I came back to Ireland, I was 10. And that's when I kind of started playing basketball and I started playing like camogie and like, which is a big sport in Ireland. Camogie and hurling would be a really, really big sport here. And it was only when I came back here, I really got involved in all of it. Like, and it's just, I think it's, I mean, I'm sure you see this where you're from. It's like, whatever is really big in the area, all the kids just gravitate towards it. And my sister was really good at basketball. And because she was good and she was tall, then it was like, oh, you're Trina Hurley's sister. She plays basketball. She's really good. And she was playing for the Irish team. And then it was like, let's go scout her sister because she's probably good too. And then it kind of starts from there. And like, I guess, look, for me, that was kind of, I was always following her. She's 15 months older than me. And I just kind of chased her around a lot too. So that probably had a lot to do with what I was choosing to play as well.
Yeah. So for you, what was it like playing multiple sports at the same time? Because now in this generation, it's important for kids to learn different aspects of each sport before deciding on what sport they're going to play. So for you, what was it like just playing multiple sports and learning?
Well, look, I'm really big on like non-early specification when it comes to sport. Like I just really like for kids to play everything. Like I've got 2 kids myself and I am all for them doing everything because like, look, for us, it was just, the thing was mom and dad had to be really organized as well. Like we carpooled a lot, which, makes a big difference. You've got to kind of invest in a group, in a community and allow everybody to get involved. So like my friends' parents were often driving us around. And as I said, my mom and dad were always there driving us around. That makes a big difference. Like, so for me, like it was never the balance of, oh my God, I'm trying to do too much. The hardest thing was actually choosing what was going to come first, So for me, like I was going to go on scholarship to America and I actually had a really bad accident. Like I kind of fractured my C3 and C4 vertebrae in my neck, which kind of stopped that. And I had to take a bit of time out of playing and ended up kind of playing a lot more camogie than basketball. Whereas like the basketball, if you're a kid and somebody offers you the chance to play something that's going to take you all over the world or something that's just going to take you to Dublin to play in Croke Park, I mean, if you're a smart kid, you're going to be like, yeah, here, give me the thing that's going to take me all over the world, which basketball did take me all over the world and it was great. But like, it's when you're older, then you kind of, you don't think about it like that. You're just thinking like, where's the biggest opportunity? Whereas actually with the benefit of hindsight, the camogie actually probably gave me a lot more as well, because just, you know, in the context of playing a big Irish game that everyone in this country is part of, there probably was more opportunities in that, but I just didn't see that at the time. Does that make sense? You know, so the hardest thing, look, I mean, for anybody is actually just trying to find the time to play both of them, and then, you know, realizing what you're good at and putting a lot of time into it, and just making sure that you put enough time into it too, because, you know, the hardest thing you can do when you're trying to play multiple sports is that you put way too much time and effort into them, and you end up injuring yourself because you're trying to please too many people. So for me, it was all about, look, just dedicate the right amount of time to something, find what you really love, and then try to stick with it. And look, it's okay to change your mind too. That's probably the biggest piece of advice that I'd give people. It's not all about putting all your eggs into one basket and sticking at that forever. If you want to change your mind, that's totally cool too.
Yeah, that happens a lot over here.
Yeah.
A lot of people change their minds. But for you, I want to talk about the injury. And obviously, the injury, if you get an injury up here, there's no joke, especially neck, the vertebrae you just said, and the spine. It's no joke. It can end your career potentially and paralyze. But for you, how did you, obviously you overcame it. And for you, how did you overcome that injury, and how did you cope with it? And what would you tell other people that have those same type of injuries that you had?
Oh man, it was really tough, because like at the time we didn't know how bad it was, you know. So you kind of think, you assume the worst, and then, you know, suddenly, like day by day, things were just getting better, and I was kind of able to start feeling movement again, and like that's really worrying for parents as well, because, like, you know, kids just want to play sport. You never think that when you're sending your children out to play sport that they're going to come home with this horrific accident, particularly playing something like basketball, which is a non-contact sport, and like anybody who plays basketball knows it's about as non-contact now as the man on the moon. It just doesn't happen like that. But look, I think once I kind of was able to you know, put small steps. I mean, it took a long time. Like, you know, there was a neck brace for over a year, and, you know, a lot of time out of the game, which all that kind of stuff is really difficult. But I think once you realize that you're going to be okay, then you start thinking about your sporting career again. And look, I would often say that you're never the same afterwards, because the fear in your head does actually stop you from doing certain things, and it changes the player that you are. But I was just grateful to be able to play again. You know, I think in small terms, as you say, like when you get an injury at that point of your neck, it's just so dangerous, and the amount of people who are lucky to walk away from something like that is actually a very small amount of people. So look, I count my blessings more than anything else. It may have impacted my sporting career, but it definitely didn't impact my life to the extent that it could have. You know, I think so. If I was giving people advice, I'd be just like, look, you know, the small mercies and the good things in life make you kind of realize, oh wow, actually, you know, this could have been a hell of a lot worse, and it wasn't.
Yeah, I what you've been through, I call it a miracle story.
Yeah.
It's amazing how you overcome that, and obviously you're doing amazing things now as an author, a broadcaster, coach, and man, it's amazing what your story has been. And for you, I want to ask you, so the sports that are in your country, do you think it's time for them to maybe put it have it in the US too? Because some people don't in the US don't know what type of sports you guys have in Dublin. So do you think it's time to maybe have the people experience those type of sports here in the US?
Oh, I would love that. I honestly would love that more than anything, because like, so I did my internship in America. I lived in Mississippi for a year, and like we would just go to America all the time. I have lots of friends who live over there, you know, so we would have spent a lot of time. Even when I was playing basketball, we would have been over there quite a lot. So I watch a lot of American sport, and like when we have cable TV here, we have access to literally every American sport. Like even, you know, when the Sweet 16 is on, like I watch that, you know, here, like follow as much college sport as I do pro sport here. And I would love that the same thing goes both ways, because we do have this like, so in the last couple of years there's this program called GAA Go that allows Gaelic games, Irish sports, to be viewed abroad. It's like a subscription service, so you can do it. But I would love that becomes like, you know, free access to people, because you need to show it to them to grow the game. It's like, you know, you guys have seen that with like baseball, lacrosse, basketball, soccer, whatever it is. If you put it on the TV, people will watch it, but you need to give people access to it first. And like, I would think that hurling and camogie is probably the best field. I mean, they say that it's the fastest field sport in the world. I would love for a wider audience to see that, because I do think that people all over the world would play that game if they got the exposure to it. But you just, it's kind of that build it and they will come philosophy. You just have to build it first, and somebody needs to take a big leap to maybe take a financial hit for the growth of what is an amazing game.
Yeah. So now, obviously, women in sports, obviously, it was, back in the day, it was kind of tough for you guys to get into the field. But for you, what's it like now seeing women in sports grow and then having multiple things in your career now, working in the sports industry and seeing the growth of women in sports?
It's been huge. Like, I mean, the last 5 years is just not comparable with anything I've ever seen. Like when I was playing, you couldn't even get a match program with information on the players who were playing the bloody game. Like now, you have this wide open space on the internet where like there is like proper player profiles. You can flick open your newspaper and people are actually writing about it. Kids know players' names, which just never happened in my day. And like to me, that is the greatest difference. So we had this campaign in Ireland that ran over the last couple of years called 20 by 20, and the whole philosophy behind the campaign was you can't see it, can't be, so it was just like, for young girls, if you can see it, you can be it. And like they just built this whole campaign around it, and it was really powerful because they spoke to kids. And like even with the book that I've written, it's a children's book instead of an adult's book, because I think you need to speak to the children to change the game. Like if you start speaking to the adults, they're coming on the journey, but they're not coming on it as quickly. Whereas actually, if you go and you say to kids, here, listen, and you sit down a boy and a girl and you tell them that the boy is getting more of an opportunity than the girl, then they think it's wrong. But it's only when you present it to them that they actually recognize that. And that to me is the biggest difference, that actually children are now recognizing that it's wrong. So the shift in mindset has been phenomenal. And like, I see it in every aspect of my life now. I see it as a mother with my own kids, and I have a boy and a girl, so I get to see it directly. I see it in my job with the amount of coverage that we're doing. Like we're doing way more female sport on TV than we have ever done before. Like I'm talking like it is like X 500 times as much. So yeah, like it's been phenomenal. It really has. It's probably to me been the greatest change that I've seen in my broadcasting career, I think.
So for you, how do you balance it out? Obviously, you're not only a broadcaster, you coach sometimes, you coach kids in basketball, you're an author. And how do you balance all these things out while having two kids of your own?
Yeah, it's ask my husband. It doesn't always come naturally now, I'll tell you that much. It's hard because like, look, I think in modern life, we're all on all the time. Like, I'm sure you're like this too, you get very little downtime, and I do have to kind of stop myself from like, particularly in this game, your phone is like your mechanism to keep up with everything. So like, I'm always on, I'm like always on calls. I'm always watching like sport, or I'm talking to people, or I'm reading something or whatever. The hardest thing for me is actually shutting it down, so I try to be disciplined at it, like where at nighttime, I try to get some time away from it. But then like sometimes you're there telling yourself like, you love this. Like, this is my dream job. Like when I was a kid, this is all I wanted to do. I just really, really wanted to do this job. And like, without sounding too cliched, not everybody gets to fulfill their dreams. And like, it's great for me that I get to do that. So even in the times when it's really busy, like I've just come off a summer where I've done the Euros, I was anchoring the Euros here, and I've just been in Tokyo covering the Olympics. And like, it's hectic, but like, I wouldn't give it up for the world. Like, when I was a kid, if you'd have told me that I'd do that kind of thing in the summer, like I would have taken your hand off for it, So, look, you balance the fact that you're incredibly busy with the fact that you're incredibly lucky. And look, luckily, I also have a really good husband who has a lot of weekends where he's single parenting when I'm not around. But he loves it too. And he's because we've been together for so long, like we met when we were in college, like, so he always knew that this was the dream, and he was always there as part of the journey. And I think that probably helps too, because even the idea of going to the Olympics for 3.5 weeks, he's just like, you need to be at the Olympics. Like, it's not even a discussion. It's just like, go, so that definitely helps as well, I think.
And speaking of the Olympics, what was it like covering this year's Olympics? And obviously, with no fans, it was kind of weird not seeing fans at the Olympics. But for you, what was it like just to cover it, experience it, and then finally having an Olympics after the last one got canceled? And then the time difference. How did you deal with the time difference?
Yeah, well, all of it was a huge challenge. First of
Yeah.
all, I was just so glad that it happened because, like, for the athletes, for the amount of them who'd put their lives on hold, and obviously a 4-year cycle becomes a 5-year cycle, and that's really difficult for a lot of them. Just to get to Tokyo was a big thing. So I was really glad for them that it happened. The thing when we got there was that, like, no fans, no atmosphere, like masks all the time. Like literally the minute you leave your hotel room, we were in masks, like inside, outside. And like I was presenting our TV coverage from the top of a shopping center. So like we're literally standing on the roof of a shopping center, concrete jungle, 40-degree heat, wearing masks all day, except when you're actually physically broadcasting. So it was tough. Like it was a really, really difficult challenge, but I loved it. I mean, I'm one of those kids who just loved the Olympics when I was growing up. Always loved. This was my third one to work at.
Wow.
Very different to Rio and London, but like I think just the inspiration for everybody was the fact that it was going ahead and that people, the athletes, were just so grateful
Yeah.
that they were there, and the fact that we were able to go. They were so giving of their time to us, and they were really aware that like talking to us on television meant that they were talking to their families at home, and that's really important because like they're not getting to interact with their families out there. So our job kind of became, I suppose, I wouldn't like to say it became more important, but it definitely became an important thing to them, that they really wanted to feel like they were connecting properly with everyone at home in Ireland. So yeah, it was a big challenge, but I have to say I really, really loved it.
So, do you get to like interview these athletes there, or that were you guys allowed to interview these athletes when you were there?
Yeah, yeah. So like part of my job was presenting the TV coverage, and then part of it I would be reporting. So I'd be down at like the rowing or the boxing or whatever it was. All of the interviews were done like 2 meters socially distanced. They were allowed to take off their masks for the interview, but we weren't like having any direct contact with them, which like is hard as well. Cause like with a lot of Olympic athletes in Ireland, you would know them personally. So, when like a person who you've become close to wins a medal, what do you want to do? You want to run up, you want to hug them, you want to congratulate them, and you want to tell them you're delighted for them. And suddenly they come in and they're there with their gold medal, and they're like 2 meters away from you more,
Mhm.
and you can't go and talk to them. And it's everything's really like I suppose it just felt awkward. You're suddenly in this environment that nobody's comfortable in. Like they want to come and talk to you, you want to talk to them, and that was really tough. So look, I think it'll be an Olympic Games that we'll never forget, but I'll be forever grateful that we still got the chance to go, because for a long time I thought it wasn't going to happen. So like I think they were glad it happened, and we definitely were too.
Yeah. So, I read a recent article that you had a recent interview August 17th, and they say you were presenting the RTE for Olympics, and you guys went through a tragic situation, and I'm so sorry for your loss. You lost your brother, and how did you deal with that? And I mean, what was that like? Because it's always tough to go through something while you're busy working on the other side.
Yeah, like I think any family who's ever been through tragedy will tell you, you just kind of find a way to just get through day by day, and like all of that stuff becomes really difficult when you're thinking, what would it be like if they were here? Or like what would he think if he saw what I was doing now, or whatever. Like it'll be 10 years this year since he's passed, and like that the passage of time is really funny, because you don't really think about it. Like you 10 years like it goes by in an instant. Like we were talking there earlier about all the changes we've seen in women in sport, like, and when I think it's 10 years since he's been here, it's just like, God, look at life, the way it's changed even in that time. It's mad. Like he never met my children, which is like deeply upsetting, that like there's these two kids there who'll never know what a big influence he was on their lives and all that. So it's hard. The one thing that I would say for any family who's ever been through any grief is like knowing that they're there really helps me. It's just like we've this thing on our wall here, like, so I don't know if you can kind of see this here, but it's basically like photos on our wall, and it
Oh,
basically
okay.
says life is for living.
Yeah.
And he would have said this all the time. He was always like, life is for living. And we just put it on our wall, put a lot of pictures up or whatever, and it's like a constant reminder that he's not here, but we are. So we just need to make sure that we live our life. So like just before he died, he had sat down with my mom, and written all these things that he wanted to do, like a bucket list of things that he wanted to achieve. And like, sadly, he never got to do that. But the one thing that it made all of us do is, Jesus, I'm not leaving a bucket list behind me. You know, I will do all the things that I want to do, and I won't ever be put in a situation where I feel like I didn't live life, you know? So I guess, look, it's kind of a nice philosophy to live by. I wish I didn't have such a stark reminder of why we do that. But the fact that I do have that reminder makes me always go, yeah, I'm going for that, you know, and I won't regret that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, all I can say is my prayers and thoughts are with you guys, and you're hell of you're a strong woman. I can already see that, and people need to learn about your story more. You got to put your story out there more so people learn about you. So
oh, thanks. Yeah, look, it's, you know, I think sometimes when it comes to personal tragedy as well, you have to be aware, like I'm in the public eye, but my family aren't, you know, so it's very difficult for my mom and dad too. And I'm sure every time I'm asked about it in newspapers, which, you know, would still quite happen a lot here in Ireland. I guess when you have that kind of job in a small country where people know who you are, you do get asked about that all the time. And I just have to kind of always be aware that, like, maybe that's not what they would want either, you know. So it's that's difficult, because it's clearly not the natural life that their youngest child isn't here. But I'm sure it's not easy for them to be reading about it and hearing about it all the time either.
Yeah, so I want to get to your author. So obviously you have a couple books out there. I have one stood out. I want to ask you about Girls Play Too. So what does that mean to you? Because it's good, because it relates to you coaching these kids now too, basketball, and these kids. So what does that book mean to you, and what's it like coaching these kids now too at the same time?
Well, I think this book, I mean, really, honestly, the reason that I wrote it is because I wish I had a book like that. You know, when I was their age, I would have loved to have had a book about my heroes. Like, you know, there's this Irish woman called Sonia O'Sullivan who like won an Olympic medal. She was a world champion. And when I was a kid, she was my hero. And I was kind of thinking, like, wouldn't it be amazing to have a book about her? So I was like, well, why am I waiting for somebody else to write this book when I can do it? And I said, well, what would I want? Okay, I would want to read something that was kind of like a fairy tale, but it was real life. It was about sports stars, and I'll make it a really cool illustrated book, and like, so it'll really pop with color. And also, I loved autograph books when I was younger, because anytime I'd meet superstars, I'd ask them for their autograph. And I was like, okay, what if I made it an autograph book and also a fairy tale book? So like, the cool thing with this book is I got all of the athletes to sign underneath their stories. Oh, wow. And like, I suppose in a way, maybe, look, that's the virtue of living in a country like Ireland, where you know all these athletes. So there's 2 books in the series, 25 athletes in each. There's 50 Irish athletes, and there's everyone from Katie Taylor to Rachel Blackmore, the jockey, loads of like really, really famous Irish sports stars. But like, it's really cool. The kids have their autographs as well. And I would have loved that when I was younger. So, and I think the other thing is, now that I'm in, like, because I was like coaching kids and stuff like that, as you say, like, I have direct contact with them on a daily basis. And like, I'm talking to primary school kids all the time. I go into schools, I do talks to them, and I know what they want. Like, I know what resonates with them because I was them, you know? And like, sometimes you can kind of try too hard to be really clever and try to talk to kids and be like, oh, this is a brand new way to talk to kids. But actually, the best thing that you can do for kids is remember what you were like when you were their age. What would you have liked? And for me, it's like, show them something that, look, this book, it might not, I'm not going to say it's going to change the future, but it might just change the way you think. And you might, like, boys can read it as well and read about girl sports heroes and go, oh, she's pretty cool as well. Because like, those small, subtle changes actually make a huge difference, particularly to kids.
So obviously the school is back in session, and I saw your posts, your kids are back at school. So what's it like seeing now kids back in school, but under different circumstances, still wearing masks, obviously, in the schools? And what do you think of the idea of kids still wearing masks, and with the teachers too?
Yeah, it's tough, like, isn't it? You know, I think we've all just been through such a wild couple of years. You just can't really, like, I don't know if you feel this way, but it, like, to me, it still feels surreal. Like we're living through a movie, you know. You're just like, when is this thing going to end? You know, because it seems like we're just constantly coming out of it, and then we're right back into it. And you're like, right, okay, we're in a new variant constantly. And it's just really, really hard. But I think what we've seen here in Ireland is that with every gradual step, it does feel like we're getting a small bit closer to normality. Like even when the kids were going back, because I think during the summer here, there was a big fear of maybe they won't go back, So once I was able to kind of send them out the door this week, it was like, well, thank God for that we're actually like back on this path, and that hopefully they stay in school and all that. Because like it just makes such a difference having them coming home happy in the evenings. They've been at school, they've seen their friends, they're back playing their sport. And look, we all have a bit of normality. So look, here's hoping this is finally the end of it, because it's definitely been a long 2 years. I think we're all ready to see the back of it.
Yeah. So for you, what are you most looking forward to coming up in the future and now, especially the stuff you do with broadcasting, sports being back, especially in the U.S. We got football coming back soon next week. And then what's it like just seeing fans back into sporting events now?
Oh, it's great. Like we've got the All Ireland finals coming up. And so from the 6th of September in Ireland, you can have capacities up to kind of 75% in some stadiums, which is huge, because at the moment we had 40,000 last weekend. Wow. Which is the most we've had at anything in probably nearly 2 years now. 2019 All Ireland finals is probably the last time 80,000 people were at anything, whereas like our big stadium in Ireland is an 82,000 seater capacity, and they were kind of hopeful that maybe for All Ireland finals this year we might be able to get to that. But because the longer you're away from it, the more you realize, geez, I really love this. Even 40,000 people last weekend felt like a huge stadium for the semi-finals. So it was kind of just like, it was a real nice relief to be able to walk into the stadium and have people coming over and having the chats, and everybody's going back to matches, and you just realize the way it makes you feel, just like how comfortable everybody is at getting back outdoors and going to stuff. So like, look, having fans is, even for the sports stars themselves, it's the single greatest thing that they're looking forward to the most. And like for me, it's probably the same. Even broadcasting in an empty stadium just doesn't have the same feel. You're trying to get people into it. You're trying to raise it up a couple of notches, but it's just not the same. Whereas if you've got a full stadium of people behind you, you're right on it. And for me, that's what I'm looking forward to the most, just getting back to what we do, full stadiums, huge days, and being part of that. Like for me, it doesn't matter whether it's like, obviously next year we've got a football World Cup coming up. Hopefully I'll be working on that. We've got a women's rugby World Cup coming up, so hopefully we get to do a bit of that as well. But like, it's all major tournaments, that's the thing that motivates you. Like, and because Paris is obviously now only 3 years away, like another Olympics would be great to do too. So look, I'm looking forward to all those, but like first and foremost, just getting back to full stadiums. I really can't wait for that. That's the biggest thing for me now.
So are you planning on writing more books, or planning on covering sports in the US too?
Yeah, I'd love that. I really would like to do at some point a worldwide version of Girls Play 2. It's a lot easier in Ireland because I have control over it, because I know all the athletes and I can pick up the phone and say, how are you? But I can't exactly ring Serena Williams or Megan Rapinoe and say, how are you fixed for a chat here, And it would be really, really cool to do something like that, because I think that book has the power to talk to girls and boys world over, which would be lovely. I'd like to do a boys series of the book as well here, just because I do really think it's important for girls and boys to have their sports heroes in a book. So probably do that over the next couple of years too. And then after that, it's just the day job, like the hardest thing with doing books, and like you see this with doing podcasts and everything else, is trying to find the time, trying to dedicate the time to say, today I'm doing this. Because like, you're running around, you're doing a million other things, you're chasing the kids, you're trying to coach kids, you're trying to, do your actual job. And I still play a bit of sport as well. So it's just trying to get out and do all that is hard to find enough hours in the day. But what I would say is that when I do get the chance to do it, it is incredibly rewarding. So I'll keep doing it as long as people enjoy it. If people don't enjoy the books anymore, I won't do it. But right now, I think everybody is getting a big kick out of them.
You gotta do more. People, I'm sure people enjoy your books. You gotta do more.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I'll tell that to my husband. I'd say he'd love the idea of me disappearing into a dark room for another few months.
Yeah. So before I let you go, the last two things here. Our team is part of this foundation. It's called the Hugh Jackson Foundation. We're trying to help and prevent human trafficking, making sure the community stays safe and the kids stay safe. It's so horrible out there what we're seeing when it comes to human trafficking, and we got to stop that. And so I'll send you the foundation so you can go check it out.
Yeah. I mean, look, that's really important as well. And like, credit to you guys for doing that, because actually getting involved in something like that, it's very easy for everybody to just, jump up and down and say, oh, that's terrible. But actually doing something really meaningful is, like you're playing your part in trying to end all this as well. So look, fair play to you guys for doing that, because it's hugely important that we stamp out like all the human atrocities that we're seeing out there. It's a mad world, and
Yeah.
every small bit really, really helps.
Yeah, for sure. And the last thing here, would you like to say anything to all the nurses, doctors, and essential workers right now?
Yeah, well, look, just keep doing what you're doing. Like, honestly, like, I mean, I think you don't really get a full appreciation for what everybody does until you see it firsthand, like being in the middle of a global pandemic, and just how life-changing having people who really, really care makes such a difference. Like, you're literally saving lives on a daily basis. So thank you for doing what you do, and please keep doing it, because the world really needs people like you right now. And I think we're all forever grateful that you chose to do this for your life and save so many others. So thank you.
Yeah, well said. And there it is. That wraps up episode 889 for the NR Sports Show with Jacqui Hurley. She's a former athlete. Now she's a broadcaster, author, coach. She does everything, covering all sports, Olympics, everything. Go check her out on all social media formats. Jacqui, I just want to say thank you for joining the show today. It was truly an honor. You're such an inspiration. Keep up the great work. You're representing women in sports strong, so keep it up. And you and your family stay safe down there. And we would like to have you back on the show at some point down the line so you can meet the full team. So keep up the great work and stay safe.
No problem at all. Thanks a million for having me.
Anytime.